Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm looking at a book from a publisher we haven't looked at before. This publisher is Palgrave Macmillan, and the book we're looking at is an interesting book in a very important contemporary area. It's called Transition Banking and the Impact of Regulatory Change, and it deals with the Basel III and other challenges for the global economy. I'm saying Basel rather than Basel because I call it Basel, but some people may know it as Basel III. This book has been written by Ruth Wandhofer, and my wife Elizabeth and I had a discussion about the book. We thought it was a very interesting book to read, and we've given it the title for the review of Regulating Transaction Banking, A Leading Authority Speaks Out. Now let's have a look at the book first of all. It's a hardback. Interesting cover at the front there. Then there's spine and there's a little bit on the back, a few little quotes. The dust cover has some information explaining what the book's about. The title gives most of it fairly clear structure. And there is Ruth. Always give a nice bit of publicity to the author who puts a lot of work in. This is the front of it. There's another book by her as well. There's the main front. The other book she wrote is called EU Payments Integration. Then she's given a nice little dedication there, which probably she knows a little bit more about than we do, from Heraclitus. And I don't know very much about that, I have to say. So I'll leave that unsaid. There's the contents section. It sounds that I know nothing at all about this, probably right partly. And there are the 7 chapters covered. And then you've got a list of tables, which are also in the book itself, and figures, tables and figures too. You've got a little bit of information about Ruth as the author, and then you've got a foreword, and I'll mention a bit about the foreword in a moment. This is a very interesting book, by the way, and a very pertinent book for 2015. There's a bit more of the foreword, and then you've got acknowledgements, and then we get into the main book in a moment, because we've also got a lot of abbreviations, and these are very, very helpful, because when you're dealing with the banking industry and a lot of these areas, sometimes you can forget what some of these things mean, some of these abbreviations mean, so it's always useful to have that at your fingertips. Now you get to the first chapter. Now you can see that this is just body copy. You go through it. There are no footnotes of any sort, but it's just basic flowing text all the way through. But you can see what the book is actually aiming to do all the way. Post-crisis regulatory change, there's been a lot of things happening. Normally starts with an introduction, then the detail of what's happening, and again you get you're actually getting here a number of paragraph numbering. It's not that much, but it does help possibly find some of the things you may be looking at. There are things here like, for instance, various actual definitions of certain terms and so forth. Then you've got, again, with this and a lot of other chapters rather, a whole range of points. And then what you do have is concluding remarks. And again, so you've got the beginning, the middle and the end all the way through each of the chapters. At the back, you've got the index right at the end. And then just before that, you've got all the notes. Now, the way this is done is that the notes for each of the chapters got the little foot number, note the actual number, and then you've got to cross-refer to the right at the back. So you don't have footnotes at the bottom of each page, but you can see how the notes are structured. So if you want to find something out for a particular piece of research, that's how you will actually get the information. And as I say, a lot of this information is highly detailed and extremely helpful. It's a very good book of a very high quality, and I'm very impressed with it. Now, this is what we say, because as I've indicated, the whole issue of banking is very emotive. There are lots of very strong views being put forward at the moment, and have been for some time, about the way that this particular industry operates. So this is what we say. Banking is arguably the area of financial services which links most frequently with the law. This book's been published, as I say, by Palgrave Macmillan, and it's an important book written by Ruth Wandhofer, and I hope I've pronounced her name correctly. And it discusses in depth and with refreshing clarity the regulatory reform process, which in her words, quote, plays the important role of stabilising the banking industry with a view to significantly reducing the risk of future crisis. Now that's a big ask actually, but I'm glad that that is the basis upon which she is going about looking at the issue, because it is such an important matter, because it affects effectively everybody's lives. The crisis, of course, referred to here is the worldwide financial meltdown that raised its head in 2007, and which, among other consequences, has generated a plethora of banking regulation designed to prevent such crises happening in the future. It's all very well to say that, but it's not quite as simple as that in practice, as I'm sure anybody involved in this sector will know. But has, therefore, all this regulatory zeal been uniformly a good thing? Has the regulation of deposit-taking institutions actually, as the author describes, ensured the safety of customer deposits and the stability of the financial system? Or have certain unintended consequences been created as well? These are questions that obviously will be posed as you read through the text. In examining the answers then to these questions, Wandhofer looks at what she terms two building blocks, regulatory reform and transaction banking. Within these two parameters there is, of course, an astoundingly wide spectrum of issues which continue to impact on the banking industry worldwide, such as structural reform, limitation on certain bank activities, the issue of centralised supervision, the problem of too big to fail banks, and so forth. And these are only a few examples of the areas discussed, and they are very serious and important areas, certainly for the British economy, and of course I would argue for both the European and worldwide economies as well. The banking industry, transaction banking in particular, impacts on all of us, as I've just said, and it provides a fascinating subject for scrutiny. Certainly, Wandhofer is impressively well qualified to explain its complexities, being a regulatory expert and top authority on transaction banking regulatory matters. Among an astonishing array of qualifications, Ruth chairs the EU-wide Payments Regulatory Expert Group and is also chair of the European Payments Council Information Security Group. And they are fairly substantial titles in their own right. Currently, she's Global Head of Regulatory and Market Strategy for Citi's Treasury and Trade Solutions business. So therefore she comes with impeccable credentials, knows what she's talking about, and is imparting, I think, some very sensible commentaries and points which we need to consider for the future. Now, writing in the foreword, Victor Constancio, I hope again that's pronounced correctly, who's Vice President of the European Central Bank, refers to this book as an essential navigation tool to enable understanding of the key measures imposed by the regulatory reform of the banking industry and their impacts on banks, their customers and the broader economy. And essentially it is both for those involved in the banking industry and those who aren't. Banking, says the author, has been public enemy number one for the last few years, with little said about the relevance of banking to the real economy. Well, she perhaps would say that, wouldn't she? But she makes a point. Here at last, then, is a book which does just that, with gravitas, erudition and panache. It does indeed explore the regulatory landscape in detail, including the set of regulatory measures known as Basel III or Basel III. As accessible to lay readers as to professionals, in our view, this is a book that speaks with authority to academics, to researchers and to students, as well as to legal practitioners and indeed anyone involved in the financial services industry. If you wish to enhance your understanding, therefore, of the ins and outs of banking, you need to rush out and order it now. and the publication date is cited at 2014. I've recorded this in the spring of 2015. Let's have a quick look at the book again. It's a hardback, runs to under 300 pages. There again are the notes at the back, detailed notes if you're looking for anything particular. A lot of information that is stated in the text is justified, and those notes are there to help it. Let's go into the middle of the book. The payments special, Europe versus the US. A big issue because of the big economic blocks that we have at the moment. And then there's a very good chapter, the journey from Basel 1 to Basel 3, History and Fundamentals Explained. So there's a lot of detail, probably for people who don't understand a lot of this particular area of banking law and banking practice. It could well be quite confusing. You've also got some tables of information there and various other very heavy bits of detail which you may possibly find of interest, but don't be put off. What I did like was the way in which the conclusions are put forward towards the end of each chapter, which again assists in giving some understanding of what is actually happening at the moment and where we're going. And you do get the various figures here, tables and figures and so forth, which will try to assist explaining what is actually happening at the moment. And just to remind you again, very useful abbreviations right at the front. I'd be very pleased with this book. I think it's an excellent contribution to what we're facing at the moment within the banking industry, both as practitioners, advisors, and people even with a more of a general wish to understand a bit more about what is happening. Because as we've said in the review, and it's mentioned in the book, what is going on affects everybody. So we've got to have some idea of what is happening. And if we don't, and we're leaving it to people who are making big mistakes, we just don't want to see history repeating itself. Anyway, thank you to Ruth, thank you to Palgrave very much for producing this book. It's a very interesting read. It's not for the faint-hearted. Do read it. You'll find it a little bit hard going in places, I think. I certainly did. But I found it very interesting to see what is actually emerging as we get more and more into the 21st century. So thank you to all concerned. Bye-bye.